be prompt and start right at 9 o'clock. And I honor this many people to come to something called Research and Language Teaching, so I'm honored and very curious about why you're here. So I will I'm going to adjust the different lengths of time for the different sections of things I would like to cover based on your feedback and what you have to say or have to ask about. And you may want to have a device out so that you can try some things. We're going to do some research searching, and I'll show you some tricks that I've learned because I've had to spend about, I don't know how many hundreds of hours now reading or searching for research because I'm a PhD student, so that's what you do. It's kind of like, I think of it as like rummage sailing. Do you like rummage sales? Like, I love rummage sales, but there's so much junk. You have to kind of pierce through there, and some will suit you, and some will suit somebody you know, and it's great stuff, but you don't want it. So that's how research feels to me. So I'll show you some tricks about how to find it. And excuse my tech stuff if I am unsure. If things are too far away, some of the things might be a little bit of a small print. Feel free to move during the session. It's no problem at all. So I'll start off saying who am I and why do I want to talk about this, or what do I know about this topic? How does research work, the big picture? How to find articles, specifically ones that might be useful to you as a language teacher or related to second language acquisition or something related to our field. How to read an article, because guess what? They're not all super approachable, right? And then how research and language teaching can relate to each other. And then some types and topics of research. There was so much more when I started a PhD program at the University of Iowa 2 years ago. I was very impressed. And some of you who had a really good master's program in education or linguistics or something like that, it's going to be kind of old hat to you. But my master's degree program didn't really lead me in that area, and I didn't know what all that stuff was. So it's all been these past 2 years for me. So I guess that leads, oh yes, I'm looking at you like you should be advancing the slide. Okay. So I was a Chinese, I mostly loved language teaching, and I loved seeing what happened to people when they had comprehension-based language teaching, the excitement that they had for their progress in language. PhDs, I could teach at the university and be in teacher education and research in K through 12 language classrooms and share the great practices I was hearing about from my peers and seeing happen in my own classroom. And and teachers last in their career and enjoy being a language teacher. So that's kind of where my background started from. So I'm at the University of Iowa now. My advisor is Pamela West. Say that now on camera, but that's good in a good way. She's very fair. She's great, and so I'm also her research assistant. So I've been doing some projects for her and to some degree with her. So some of the things that I've learned have been because of her. So credit and thanks to her. So I don't know everything though. I think of it like because I'm a student, right? I'm not a researcher as a career. But I've had to look up a lot of things myself. So I'll share what I know. I think of it if it's a actual proficiency level, maybe I'm headed towards intermediate low now occasionally, and in novice high maybe for a reliable rating there or something like that. So I know some things, but I don't know everything, and nobody really does. But so how does research work? Have you ever had the thought like, if there was just one study that I could use to show a parent or an administrator or my skeptical colleague about why I teach how I do? Have you ever had that thought? Yes? Do you think that it's out there and you just need to find it? Or do you see my two analogies and you think, uh-oh. Yeah. There isn't one. So the way research is a big thing, and I think sometimes as teachers we talk about something that's more than strictly research as research. Like if we look at Stephen Krashen's website, has a lot of free stuff, great stuff there. A lot of it is really more like what you might call a think piece. It's summing up other things based on a lot of different studies and a lot of empirical studies, but it's not necessarily one study that is now presented with all the details, and here's the methodology we used, and here's how we got results, and here's the conclusions, here's some implications we think. It's more like based on his very long career and great experience, I'm seeing all these trends and all these different things that I've read. It looks like this. This is my new hypothesis. Reliable, but it's not strictly speaking exactly research. So what I'm thinking of mostly is empirical questions. You're going in to try to understand something about it. You're gathering data that might be through interviews. It might be through tests. It might be gathering numbers. It might be gathering but to try to kind of clarify, like which part am I talking about? Mostly, I'm thinking mostly empirical studies. So there's gather these empirical studies. So the analogy, this is from a friend of mine, Reed Riggs. We were talking about research, and I did this because he just got his PhD, and I was telling him about what it was like my first year, and I did like this with my hands. He's like, "What does that mean?" Like it just exploded. Like I didn't know there was so much out there. There were a lot of people investigating things about language teaching that I thought were important that I thought nobody was doing. Like, for example, the identity of students and things like how, when they're encountering a second language, what that does to their own like home identity. And so there is a really emotional and personality engaging process of language acquisition. There are people that are studying that. They've made their career just looking at how do people acquire a second language from the angle of what does it do to how they feel about who they are. So I saw that in my students. I didn't know there was research like that. So there's these oceans of stuff going on. Nobody knows every single thing that is happening, but you can kind of start to find currents. And you can sort of know, this is one that I'm interested in, so I'm going to find out, oh, here's some big prominent names that keep coming up in different articles. They probably are doing more significant work with that, so I'll learn about them a little bit. But then there's this other current over here that is about verb endings, and I just don't really care about that too much, so I'm just going to let somebody else go and see how people acquire verb endings. But I know it's there, so if I had to have it, there's that current over there, and I might know a name or two. So it's like these trends and currents and flows. There's no one big thing that answers everything. Everything is answering a little bit, and it's building off of all these other studies that have been done. The second analogy I got from, it's called the Grad Academy. If you go to graduate school, I really recommend it. It's an online program, but we got it through the University of Iowa. I think it's two people that maybe are married to each other, and they lead this thing on, like, how do you survive graduate school? And one of the things they did was talk about how does research work, and they used the pub analogy. So if you imagine, like, if people over here that are in one specific topic, and they're talking to each other mostly, and over there across the room, they're not really talking about the same stuff, but you might know of the man there, something like that. So people over here might stand up and come over and join this group because they're like, hey, we just did this study and we found this and this thing. It relates that mill around and shift and move. Occasionally they get rude. It's actually kind of fun. If you see it, it's like this snark that's hidden inside the empirical research articles, that like a little dig at somebody else. Like, I don't know, to me it's really fun. So I actually, I'm probably in the right field. I actually get some chills sometimes when I think about some of these things. So yeah, so like a pub full of people. People are chatting, talking. Nobody has the whole big picture. No, and they're trying to do it a little step at a time. Right? So you kind of build up this body of stuff. So we can be kind of conclusive about a lot of things about language acquisition or language teaching. There's a lot of things we do know pretty well, but it's not like this is the one that answered it all. Makes sense? So this is where, if you would like to try some surfing, I encourage you to open up your computer. And I need to know how much time you want to spend. Would you like me to show you like kind of a process for finding things on the internet? And then how to cope with it if you don't have access to articles that are behind a paywall. So a lot of those are, they cost like an ungodly amount, like $45 for a day's rental of one article. That's just not reasonable. There are some legal workarounds with those. So should I just go for it? Okay. So I'm going to use Google Scholar. It is just like Google, but it is specific to research articles and to some degree books that are kind of academic-y kinds of books. So that's what your heading looks like. So it's scholar.google.com. I bet you if you go to the thing in the corner that has all the Google apps, it's in there somewhere, but I'm not sure where. So what do we want to find? Somebody, if somebody today has a real topic like, I have this question, let's go through the process. Otherwise, I'll make up one.
Acquisition of the 100 most frequent words applied toward the understanding of the past tense.
Mm-hmm.
When is it appropriate to expect students to understand the past tense?
Okay. Sounds. I don't know if this is going to get us anything, but this was the first phrase that made sense to me, acquisition of French past tense. Let's to something that will be specific, a person's name that I can add to that list or something along those lines. So, we have slightly cut off left side. I wonder if there we go. Okay. So, I don't like that. There we go. Okay. So I'm trying to show that column over there. One of the things that I've heard people sometimes complain about is, for example, like this says 1983. And I think a lot of times teachers are like, 1983, so? Okay, 1983, wow, that's got a lot of history behind it, or something, In academia, they'll say 1983, okay, well, what's been said since? Not to say that the 1983 article doesn't count or isn't valid anymore, but it needs to be, because it's this conversation, what happened in the conversation later? So we might want to check that one out, but especially we might want to find who cited it. So here is, I'll open it up in a new tab. So this looks like it's really relevant to her question. Here is where that one is available. Seeing that it's through Eric, it's not through a journal. This might be, let's see. I'm just surprised to see it in Eric. Often that's going to be somebody's dissertation or master's thesis, or maybe something else that wasn't peer-reviewed. Do you know what I mean by peer-reviewed? Do you know why it's an issue? Maybe somebody that is familiar with it, could you explain? Kika, I saw you nod. Do you mind?
I know what peer-reviewed is. I guess I don't know why it's an issue.
Okay. If you say the first part. How's that?
Like it has to stand up to scrutiny, right? Like it's like you have to have other people looking at it and say like, yes, this is correct. No, it's not correct. It's like fact checking in the scholarly world, right?
Right. It's like, do other people did methods used here really getting at the question that they say that it did? Were they reliable? Were they consistently applying the principles that this research methodology says they should? Did they look to seem like they were doing careful data analysis, have reasonable conclusions? And so as a specialist in that field is supposed to read that, 3 or 4 of them actually, and to kind of help, like, okay, now that you're trying to publish what you did here, we want to be a little more careful. Won't be, oh, you have a choice. Get that. Did you have something else?
Yeah, I have a follow-up question. So, and maybe it's just because I'm ignorant because I'm so new about this, but
sure.
It seems to me that there aren't that many people who would take time to research that. Articles that would be, like, I feel like whenever I look, it's crashing, which is great. But if I bring it to my colleagues and say, look, this is the research, and it's only crashing, they're going to be like, it's one person. Like, what are you even talking about?
Right. This is another reason that I'm in a PhD program, actually. Specifically that. Like there have to be more people. And there, in fact, are. But they're all behind these darn firewalls, and they're all talking to each other. You know, like the pub, it's got a door that's shut to the rest of the world sometimes. And it shouldn't be that way, and I don't think the people in there even mean it to be that way. And I think they are trying more than I realized to talk to teachers, to talk to general population. But it's hard for them to do for a lot of different reasons. And so, yeah, there are definitely more people. You'd be shocked, I think, how many people are doing second language acquisition work now. Because it's a field that started in the 60s or 70s, really. And it's big. It's like it was the blow up my head thing again. Like there's more than you might expect, and it's like learning how to cope with what to search. So let's make sure we get back to that. So this one does look okay. So with that issue of maybe not peer reviewed, I'd have to investigate it. So it looks like we found a pretty good search phrase. What else we can do? That cited by 107 people is quite a few people. That's pretty nice. Oh, one more thing before we leave this one alone. We need to see, can we get this for free? I'm seeing it only as, I bet you it's not going to appear if we did that. So if it was through this one, you found something that said, Eric, you can ask for full text available. The other thing that we can do is go back to one and see if she's got anything else. Or she wasn't in it. I thought I saw Martha as the name. But I'm opening up the window that says cited by 107. So these are people that use this article in their own article, referring to it. So they're also on the same topic approximately. And we can go back over and see. Studies in second language acquisition, which is a journal that keeps coming up for anything that's language acquisition related. That's a really big deal, kind of one. Book. You might look here. This is usually what's going to tell you that you can get this one for free on the internet, just right away. If you follow this, I'm going to try this one. Just I like seeing researchgate.net because a lot of people who are doing their work online, even if the journal, like sometimes the journal will allow them to share it through their own website, or sometimes if you write to the person, you can get that. So we've got, okay. This is going to be down there. Oh, I blew it up too big. So now we've got the actual article. Right. So this is one that cited the one. So first, I'll stop myself because I'm starting to get into the how to read them. Let's keep finding them. So we found one of those through there. We'll use that as our sample of how to read through an article in just a moment. Let's see. But we haven't gotten too much yet. We don't want to rely just on one or two sources if possible. Let's see if we can keep going down there. Looking for slightly newer than that to get a little bit of a comparison. So do you see what I mean by the rummage sale thing, garage sale kind of thing? Like this one is looking at advanced French instructed learners, but they're learners of English instead of French. So it's like that kind of thing where you have to start piecing through there a little bit. But they have that one online. So that one is another that's easy to get. Let me find one that is appealing to you. Is it Naomi? Naomi, okay. One that's appealing, but that does not look like it is available free. We're going to try to see where we can figure that one out. So this one looked pretty relevant, so probably from the UK because they say pupil instead of student. Not terribly new, but not terribly old. Yeah, see, they're going to want, So this one, they want us to pay something, some terrible amount. Yeah, per. I'm going to try that. If you have an alma mater that has library access available to you, make sure you get it and keep it. So if you had an MA program, will allow access to resources there. I know of some schools that do and a lot that don't. Like even they'll cut you off like a week after you graduate. That would be a great service to their alumni and maybe get alumni to give more back to their school if there was something that was an ongoing relationship like that. But at any rate, these folks, you see they're blue, right? That means there's a link. And let's see if we can see if we've got an email address. The thing is, they are legally allowed to send you their article. Okay, we're getting his other articles in this journal, I think. Let's go to article information. Let's see here. And down there. Yeah, he still is. Okay, man, I was hoping this was one of the ones that had this. Usually, when I've done this, it worked. And this is part of the thing about the searching and sifting through things. If we had more time, I think we would probably be able to find him. What we could do is take this and then that article information that has his school, and I would search him on the internet. I would look up the Manchester Metropolitan University Institute of Education and G. McCrory, and I would find his email address and say, I'm interested in the acquisition of past tense in French. I'd like to know what the stages seem to appear to be to English speakers learning French as a second language. I would love to have access to your article. Would it be possible to send me a copy? Absolutely do that. You can do that with anybody that's got an article that's posted like this that's behind a paywall, and they are legally able to send it to you. They just can't broadcast it. They can't put it up for free necessarily, depending on what the journal's requirements are. So this one keeps it behind a paywall, but the authors should be able to send it to you. So either alma mater library, or find the author and request it, or the other one. You could check. That's a good one. If you find out, I'd love to know. Yeah, I wonder if I would bet you big libraries might be able to access some of those kinds of journals. It's that, at the University of Iowa, they just went through purging a list of journals that they don't want to subscribe to anymore because they're so expensive. Kind of a movement, and maybe Dr. to it because he did recently, about trying to get more open source journals so people are publishing without a paywall. The authors don't make money when you publish in a journal, you realize. This is not about that. Paywall in that way. Book, second language an introductory course. This one looks like a promising link to follow up first, but since it's a book, I know for sure what you can do at your own library. I got this from the Columbus Junction, Iowa library, not that book, but another book that was like an academic book. They can do interlibrary loan for you. I didn't realize, like, even a little public library in the cornfields can do interlibrary loan. So I don't know if they have a limit on that, but absolutely make use of that. So books through interlibrary loan, university access, ask the author. Those are the big ones. Any questions about finding things? I think I referred to it, but to me the biggest thing about finding articles that relate to what you want to know is just figuring out what search phrase. Yeah?
So if one of the things that we want to go into are on air and don't have a link off to the right, essentially we'll have to find another way to request access.
It looks like that.
These other
Yeah.
you sent.
Yeah, and because I'm novice high, I can't help you at that point, but maybe in a couple of years I'll know more about that. But this one, it surprises me actually to see that. I might try searching this another, like I go back and I would do a search of that title and see if there's another possible way it's coming up. There's a citation to it. Oh, if you are really writing something for a master's program, this little quote mark thing is super because it can give you the citation. It's not always perfect, but I hate trying to figure out the citation. That takes me forever. So copying and pasting this, these things down here are ways to collect articles. So if you're really going, like if you're in a master's program, you might want to look into that kind of stuff. If it's just for your own use and you're not going to have dozens and dozens, you may not need it. But underneath the article over here, it's and this sends you to other articles that used that, the related article. Good place for the other options. Oh, cached. Yeah, I don't use that thing. The star means. The other thing that's really cool about Google Scholar and finding things is, say, you want to find out something about development of French patent. It will send you emails on a regular basis as something new comes up with that. And I'm just trying to remember which thing I click to get that. I can find. Oh, shoot. Let me. Alerts. There we go. It's over in the little 3-4 lines up in the far left corner. Let me make sure you can see where I am. So up there, 3 lines. And then there was alerts. Right there. So that's something where you can put that phrase in that relates to your interest, and then they will send you, like they say here, up to 10 results. And it doesn't get too overwhelming, I don't think. I get about 1 email from each alert per week. And so I get this nice list of fairly new articles or books that relate to it. Also dissertations and master's theses sometimes come up in there too. And then you can do that. The reason I say dissertations and master's theses are a little different too is that peer-reviewed issue again. It's also the issue of a brand new researcher that's working on their own. Because they're doing a master's thesis or a PhD, they're not out in the field with years of experience, so it's just kind of treated like it's a special case. They're also way long and very involved. And so sometimes not as specific to what you're looking for. So these were people that were interesting to me, and so I started collecting names. As I was finding articles that were interesting, I kept track of who they were by and popped them into there. Also TPRS language instruction. I wanted to see if anybody's publishing something specific to TPRS. I was going to find it, so yeah. All right, let me, I need to go back over there. So those are my main ones. It's kind of poking around in Google Scholar mostly. The other two sites that I list here, ResearchGate.net is truly a free place. A lot of people who are into research or doing research, you can contact them kind of like a Facebook thing, like there's a person you can send and request something. So that's another way to find somebody. Academia.edu, despite this ending, you can find people sharing articles online. So if you see those two through Google Scholar, you may see that PDF over on the right. Question? We keep going. Okay, so how to read them. These were a couple that I thought. One. There are of articles, and you don't have to read the whole thing, even if it's something that's interesting to you. So we've got the partial citation up here. There's the journal it's from and the volume, and then the pages that it originally appeared on, the title, the people who wrote it, and where they come from, and then the abstract. So this is where, like, that's all I'll read if I don't think that it's going to be worth the time to invest in the rest of the article. So I used to think it was like, they're always telling you the spoilers in the abstract. Like, if it were a TV show, they tell you the ending of the show. Like, no, I don't want, So it gives you truly a full sum up, including what they think the implications are. And so if that seems like, there's something maybe interesting in there, then it might be worth continuing. So at that point, what you end up seeing is sometimes an introduction, or maybe it's called a literature review. So they're going to go through and say, here's what's been done before and found before in other studies. And they'll cite different things like this kind of stuff. What I like about these is if I'm new to a subject, it can be really helpful because they're going to give me their overview version of what they think is important to their work. So if I don't know about it, I like that section. If you're already very well informed, you can kind of skim it and go, okay, that's their theoretical perspective, and this is why they're talking about it, and this is what's been done so far. And it's still all that right now. It's still all literature review. Let's see. Yeah, okay. It's a very involved one. Right, and now they're starting, it looks like, to transition because they say we've limited the review of the issues so far to first language. No, now they're going, okay. Right. And so now they're saying, okay, now we're starting to get towards their questions. Usually at the end of literature review, the introduction point where they're saying, okay, now this we don't know yet, and this is what we're trying to find out in our study that we're going to tell you about in the rest of the article. Well, here's their... Yeah, dang. Now I'm starting to wonder if this is a study at all. What? Here, okay. This is a different setup than I've done before. This is why maybe I should have gone with an article that I had read before. So this is not all that typical. They did not seem to have research methods, a clear research question. That would usually be next. So research questions, and then they describe how they did it, methodology. They'd talk about who they studied, how they studied them. If they were looking at statistical data, they're going to say what kinds of statistical tests they applied. And then they're going to start to look at, here's a sum up of the data that they've collected, and then they're going to start analyzing it. So they'll tell you about why they think this or that piece of data suggests this or that conclusion. And then they'll finish with a section, like they did have this time. They said conclusion. So now they're saying, like, okay, so what does this matter? How does it go back and relate to that beginning section? All the other research that's been done related to this topic. What new thing have they added to the conversation in the pub, the research pub? And maybe what else is not yet known, or what else might be a next follow-up thing to look at. So let's see if they ended up doing that. Yeah, this is a long conclusion, too. Wow, okay. Well, hopefully that helped, even though I couldn't show that thing. So, for example, since it has all these sections, if your interest is not really in research methodology, you can kind of just skim through there. You can, if all you want to know is like, okay, what setting was this study done? Because I'm looking at 10-year-old kids, and if they're doing university students, it's going to have different issues to me. I'm not going to find it as relevant. So you go in and you find in that early part of the research methodology, you're looking for who were the subjects, who were the people involved with this. If all you want to know is like, well, what did they think it mattered about it? The abstract will give you a very brief, but then and then if it's still interesting to you, then maybe you want to take the time to piece through the literature review and all of the technical jargon and specialists that we're trying to get ourselves. Make sense? Anything else about that?
Is it useful with your references to try to go to somewhere else?
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Is how many of Anderson, my goodness, they really looked at his work. It shows not only what you might want to do to follow up next, like somewhere else you want to go, view of came from. So if, like, let's say you know that this one person keeps showing up in the list and you're like, I kind of don't agree with anything that person has written that I've read, you might want to be sure you're balancing out with another article, or you kind of know where they're coming from. So. And I would say, yeah. And I think this one, they were doing some older dates, and this is a little bit, it was a 2000 article, I think. So they have stuff from the 80s and 90s, which is within the time frame for that field that's considered, like 20 years within education is kind of the general gist. Or in second language acquisition, looks like it's about 20 years as well, in terms of referring back to others' work. Yeah, so looking at something like this, 1976, they probably are referring to it as, here's something that was foundational in this particular subject, not necessarily that it's the current thing. So what's nice is anything they've cited is going to be in this list, but you can see how they cited it. So you might know something about that article before you have to look it up yourself, because they have a sentence or two that has that little name in parentheses with the date. Yeah, so both who cited that article and then what they cited can be real good places to look next. Yeah. Okay. Oh, by the way, these are two fun articles if you're an input-based teacher. So there's, the other thing that shocked me about starting to read research was I went into it thinking like, okay, I want to see stuff that's related to CI teaching. And I thought that was going to be, a certain subset. Not that they were all going to be doing expressly CI classroom work or CI-based stuff, or comprehensible input was going to be somewhere in the title or something. But what I'm starting to feel is like it's almost all relevant. Even if this is a study of grammar thing, it's really interesting and I get something out of that. Sometimes it's by contrast. Like I want to know about this thing that's different because now if I'm looking at a comprehension-based classroom, I know this was finding something different when it was a lot more. And this leads nicely to this next one. I want to ask you all, how do you see research and back together and share? I'll give you 1 minute. So if you want to chat with somebody there, in your own experience or aspirationally, how you think it could relate. Either way would be.
Right. You know what I mean? Like, kind of getting that pushback. Like, you gotta, well, they have it later.
Yeah.
Did you get a good chance to kind of get a start on that? We'll come back together once I get everybody's attention. When you hear my voice, if you want to raise your hand, we'll do the school thing. If you can hear me speaking, just raise your hand and then we'll get back together and go on. Yeah, okay, pretty good, pretty good. I would love to hear. You had a lot of things to say. What were some of the big things that you talked about? Mm-hmm.
Just kind of getting administration on board, those that don't really understand how we work and everyone's ideas of what a language classroom should look like versus, you know, their ideas versus what we're bringing. We have to kind of go out and get it.
Yeah.
Show everyone.
Right, right. And sometimes maybe more on the defensive because we're doing something that they weren't used to. The administrator never experienced it, maybe didn't see it before in their. Mm-hmm.
Emphasis on STEM and using research-based practices in the classroom. I feel like world language and many of the other arts have been left behind, and so when we change it, they don't have admin parents don't have that experience. So why are you singing songs and where's your word card?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like,
Right.
this is research-based practices, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
We also have
Right. Yeah.
I would add that it's also collegial. There are some comments you come back and say, why are you singing songs? Where's your verb chart?
Yeah.
We do thematic vocabulary lists. I like 10-point lists. And sometimes you have to show them, hey, this the way we want it. There's better ways now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's helpful as students to be able to tell them, like, this is why we're doing this because the research shows that this is how we acquire language, or this is why I'm having to do. This is why we're repeating this so many times, or in different ways, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Super. Yeah. Yeah.
Ideas change over time,
Uh-huh.
and so if something doesn't kind of hold the test of time, maybe it was kind of more sad, and then there's other things that will change over time, and if you're still teaching in the way like you learn, you might not be up to date on some of the kind of, the people that literally do it for a living, they investigate it while you're teaching.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's less good thoughts there. I see these as like mutually informing, hopefully, so that hopefully research is happening with teachers and in language classrooms and being informed by that. And then the language teachers are getting to access to read accessibly some research material that can relate to your daily practice in teaching. And so that we can interrelate those two concepts. And then so that we can show we're reflective practitioners. We're not making things up on the fly. We're looking at both our context and our students, and we're applying principles that we think are reasonable to how we teach. So, yeah, that's super. Okay. There are, and I already mentioned this, there are more types and topics of research than I ever guessed or expected. Are these familiar terms at all? Somewhat? Okay, yeah. So quantitative and qualitative. I hear teachers say things like they think of this only when they think of research. So I'll go ahead and say something about it. People sometimes think of research in terms of, I'm out to prove this one's best. And there are some studies that are kind of like that. But again, since it's like you've got a piece of evidence rather than you've got one answer for everything from one study, it's more like, I want to have a piece of evidence that shows this is good practice, is kind of the way I would want to rephrase it. So, teaching methodologies, and looking at professional outcomes or some other measure of student success at the end, and saying which one seemed to drive it more so. But then we work in individual classrooms, and so applying because learners in that at that age with that background, and I have these learners with this background, and so it doesn't always immediately relate, but in a big picture, they're using lots and lots of data, numbers, statistical analysis, and that kind of thing. Qualitative, though, is something that's going to be, I feel like it's broader in some respects, because there's different qualitative research, so basing on observations, interviews, things like reading somebody's journals or reading the writing of students and analyzing what they do in their writing could be qualitative research as well. So sometimes that's not treated as good because it's not doing an experiment the way that sometimes quantitative research is. But it's giving really rich description. And so I think it's very important work